The phone buzzed in my hand like a rattlesnake's warning. I stared at the message from my father, the words cutting deeper than any enemy fire I had ever faced. "You're wearing a uniform to your wedding? Disgraceful. You've embarrassed this family for the last time, Russell. Real men build empires, not play dress-up soldier." My hands trembled as I read it again, standing in my hotel suite overlooking the Rocky Mountains. Behind me, my Admiral dress whites hung pristine on the closet door, 4 silver stars gleaming on the shoulder boards like tiny beacons of everything I had sacrificed to earn them. 25 years of service, and my own father still saw me as nothing. Growing up in the sprawling suburbs of Denver, I learned early that nothing I did would ever measure up to Thomas Mitchell's standards. My father had built a real estate empire worth over $50 million, transforming vacant lots into shopping centers and luxury developments across Colorado. Our house sat on 3 acres in Cherry Hills Village, a monument to his success with its marble foyers and crystal chandeliers. But inside those walls, approval was rarer than Rocky Mountain snow in July. I remember sitting at our dining room table when I was 12, showing him my report card, straight A's across the board, plus recognition for outstanding citizenship. Thomas barely glanced at it before returning to his Wall Street Journal. "Grades don't build buildings, son. When are you going to learn something useful?" His dismissal stung worse than the paper cut I got from nervously shuffling the report card back into my backpack. My mother Margaret tried to bridge the gap between us. She would sit with me in my bedroom, looking at my collection of military history books and model ships. "Your father just wants you to be successful," she would say. But even at 12, I could hear the doubt in her voice. She understood my fascination with leadership and strategy in ways Thomas never could. High school brought more disappointments. When I made varsity football as a sophomore, leading our team to the state semifinals as quarterback, Thomas missed every single game except the championship. He showed up in the 4th quarter, checked his watch twice, and left before the trophy ceremony. "Business doesn't stop for games," he told me later when I asked why he had not stayed to see me accept the MVP award. The breaking point came during my senior year when I received my acceptance letter to the United States Naval Academy. I had worked for 4 years to earn the congressional nomination, maintaining a 4.0 grade average while serving as student body president and team captain. The letter represented everything I had dreamed of since visiting Annapolis during a family trip when I was 14. I found Thomas in his home office, surrounded by architectural blueprints and financial reports. The room smelled of leather and expensive cologne, intimidating in its perfection. "Dad, I have something incredible to share with you." I held up the acceptance letter, my hands shaking with excitement. He looked up from his papers, his expression already shifting toward annoyance. "What is it, Russell?" "I have 3 conference calls tonight. I got into the Naval Academy. Full appointment. They want me to start this summer." I waited for pride, excitement, any acknowledgement of what this meant. Thomas leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. "You're throwing away your brains, son. 4 years at that military school when you could be learning real business at Harvard or Wharton. This is Boy Scout nonsense taken too far." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Dad, this is the Naval Academy. It's one of the most prestigious institutions in America. Graduates become leaders in business, politics, the military, leaders who take orders their whole lives." He shot back. "Russell, I'm offering you something real. Come work for Mitchell Development. Learn the business from the ground up. In 10 years, you could be running your own division. In 20, you could take over everything I've built." I stood there holding my acceptance letter, feeling smaller than I had since childhood. "This is what I want, Dad. This is who I am." Thomas turned back to his blueprints. "Then you're not the son I thought I raised. When you get tired of playing soldier and want a real career, call me. Until then, don't expect me to pretend this makes sense." The last family dinner before I left for Annapolis became a funeral for our relationship. Margaret had prepared my favorite meal, pot roast with mashed potatoes and green beans from her garden. She talked nervously about dorm life and study habits, while Thomas sat in silence, cutting his meat with surgical precision. "Your room will be here when you come back," he finally said, as Margaret served apple pie. "This military phase won't last. Smart boys like you always figure out what's really important." I looked across the table at this man who shared my DNA, but understood nothing about my heart. What if I don't come back, Dad? What if I make this my career? Thomas set down his fork and stared at me with cold calculation. Then you'll have wasted the best opportunities I could have given you. And you'll have proven that all those books about honor and duty are just fantasy for boys who can't handle the real world. That conversation haunted me through my first year at Annapolis, through the rigorous academics and military training that pushed me beyond every limit I thought I had. When other midshipmen called home for encouragement during the darkest moments, I wrote letters to my mother but never called the house. Thomas had made his position clear. Then, during my second year, everything changed. Margaret was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in November. The doctors gave her 6 months. I requested emergency leave to come home for Christmas, desperate to spend time with her while I still could. The house felt different when I walked through the door in my midshipman uniform. Margaret hugged me with tears in her eyes, telling me how proud she was, how handsome I looked in my dress blues. But Thomas barely acknowledged my presence. "You see what your military games cost us?" he said on my last night home, cornering me in the kitchen as I made tea for Margaret. "Your mother needed you here this year. Instead, you were playing sailor while she fought for her life alone." The accusation shattered something inside me. "Dad, she was diagnosed after I left for school. How could I have known? You could have stayed home like I asked. You could have been here for the family instead of chasing some childhood fantasy." His voice carried a venom I had never heard before. "Now she's dying, and you'll be back at your academy, polishing your shoes while your mother is buried." Margaret passed away in March, 3 weeks before spring break. I flew home for the funeral in my dress uniform, the only formal clothes I owned. Thomas barely spoke to me during the service, and after the burial, he pulled me aside in the cemetery parking lot. "This is your fault," he said quietly, so the other mourners could not hear. "If you had been the son she needed instead of playing soldier, maybe she would have fought harder. Maybe she would have had something to live for." I flew back to Annapolis that night, carrying a guilt that would take years to overcome. But I also carried something else. The certainty that I would never again seek approval from a man who could weaponize grief to hurt his own son. The Naval Academy became my sanctuary and my proving ground. While my classmates complained about the rigorous schedule and demanding professors, I threw myself into every challenge with desperate determination. Military strategy, naval history, leadership theory, I devoured every lesson like a starving man at a feast. If Thomas thought military service was beneath me, I would prove him wrong through excellence. By my third year, I was leading my company in academic performance and military bearing. My tactical analysis papers caught the attention of Professor Commander Williams, a veteran submarine officer who became the mentor my father had never been. He saw potential in me that went beyond test scores and drill performance. "Mitchell, you have something special," he told me after I presented a paper on naval special operations integration. "You think about problems differently than most midshipmen. You see systems and connections where others see individual pieces." After graduation, I requested assignment to surface warfare with hopes of eventually joining the special operations community. My first ship was the USS Halsey, a destroyer operating in the Persian Gulf. The crew was skeptical of the young ensign from Colorado who had never seen saltwater before joining the Navy, but I was determined to earn their respect through performance, not privilege. My chance came 18 months into my deployment. We received a distress call from the merchant vessel Golden Dawn, carrying relief supplies to Kuwait. Pirates had attacked the ship 200 miles southeast of our position, taking 37 crew members hostage and demanding ransom from the shipping company. Captain Peterson called me to his cabin as we raced toward the scene. "Mitchell, your tactical analysis suggested this kind of attack was likely in this shipping lane. What's your recommendation for rescue operations?" I had studied every maritime hostage situation from the past decade, looking for patterns and successful intervention strategies. "Sir, these pirates typically consolidate hostages in the ship's mess hall or cargo hold. If we can coordinate with a helicopter insertion team and approach from multiple vectors simultaneously, we can divide their attention and minimize casualties. You're recommending a complex operation with multiple moving parts. If this goes wrong, those hostages die." I looked at the tactical display showing the Golden Dawn's position. "Sir, if we don't act, they die anyway. These pirates have never released hostages after receiving ransom. They eliminate witnesses. Captain Peterson stared at me for a long moment. You're awfully confident for an officer with 18 months of experience. I'm confident in the analysis, sir, and I volunteer to lead the boarding party. The operation launched at 0300 hours. I led a team of 8 sailors in rigid hull inflatable boats, approaching the merchant vessel from the stern, while helicopters created a diversion at the bow. The pirates had indeed gathered the hostages in the cargo hold, exactly as my analysis predicted. We breached the ship simultaneously from 3 points, catching the pirates off guard and overwhelmed. The entire operation lasted 7 minutes. All 37 hostages were recovered unharmed, and we captured 11 pirates without firing a shot. The rescue made international news, and suddenly everyone wanted to interview the young officer who had planned the successful operation. But the person I most wanted to impress never called. Thomas read about it in the Denver Post, according to my Aunt Linda, but when she mentioned how proud he must be, he apparently just shrugged and said, "Lucky break. Anyone could have done it." My performance reports glowed with commendations, and I was fast-tracked for promotion and special operations training. By age 28, I was a lieutenant commander leading SEAL insertion operations throughout the Middle East. My teams trusted me because I never asked them to take risks I would not take myself, and I never made tactical decisions based on politics or ego. The mission that earned me the Navy Cross happened in Afghanistan, deep in Taliban territory. Intelligence indicated that 3 captured aid workers were being held in a compound near the Pakistan border, scheduled for execution within 24 hours. The mission was classified at the highest levels, with success depending on precision timing and flawless execution. I planned a night insertion by helicopter, with my team of 12 SEALs hitting the compound from multiple directions, while drone surveillance provided real-time intelligence. The challenge was that the compound sat in a valley with only one viable extraction point, meaning we would have to fight our way out if the mission went bad. We inserted at 0200 hours, moving through 2 miles of hostile terrain to reach the compound. The building layout matched our intelligence, but there were twice as many guards as expected. I made the decision to proceed, knowing that waiting for backup would mean death for the hostages. The assault lasted 43 minutes. We extracted all 3 aid workers and neutralized 17 enemy combatants without losing a single team member. The extraction helicopter took heavy fire as we lifted off, but we made it to safety with our mission accomplished. The Navy Cross citation mentioned my extraordinary heroism and tactical brilliance under extreme combat conditions. The ceremony took place at the Pentagon, with the Secretary of the Navy presenting the medal to me in front of 200 fellow officers and their families. I sent an invitation to Thomas, along with a copy of the citation. He never responded. Master Chief Rodriguez, who had been with me on that mission, pulled me aside after the ceremony. "Sir, I've served with a lot of officers in 22 years. Most of them are either warriors or thinkers. You're both. That's why we'd follow you into hell." His words meant more to me than any medal. These men and women understood what Thomas never could, that leadership is not about commanding from the rear, but about earning trust through shared sacrifice and competent decision-making. My promotion to captain at 32 made me the youngest officer in my Naval Academy class to reach that rank. The ceremony took place in San Diego, with my new command, the USS Constitution, providing the backdrop. Hundreds of sailors and Marines filled the pier, celebrating not just my promotion but the leadership they had experienced firsthand. As I stood at attention while the promotion orders were read, I thought about calling Thomas to share this moment. Surely becoming the youngest captain in my class would mean something to him. But then I remembered his words at Mother's funeral, and I kept my phone in my pocket. The celebration dinner that night included officers from ships throughout the Pacific Fleet, men and women who had served with me over the years. Captain Rodriguez, now a Command Master Chief, gave a toast that silenced the room. To Captain Mitchell, who taught us that real leadership means caring more about your people than your career, and caring more about the mission than your ego. Hoo-yah! The room erupted in cheers, and for a moment I forgot about the approval I would never receive from Denver. These people had seen me at my worst and best, had trusted me with their lives and their careers. Their respect was earned through 10 years of proving myself worthy of it. But late that night, alone in my quarters, I still wondered why the man who gave me life could not see the man I had become. The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was reviewing training schedules in my office at Naval Special Warfare Command when my aide knocked on the door with unusual formality. "Admiral Peterson would like to see you immediately, sir." Full dress uniform. Admiral Peterson commanded all West Coast Special Operations, a man whose reputation for tactical brilliance was matched only by his direct communication style. Walking into his office in dress whites felt like stepping into history, with the walls lined by photographs of every major naval operation since World War II. "Russell, sit down." He gestured to the chair across from his desk, his expression unreadable. "How long have you been thinking about flag rank?" The question caught me off guard. "Sir, I focus on the mission and take care of my people. Promotions have always followed good performance. That's exactly why you're here." He slid a folder across his desk. "The Secretary of the Navy wants to discuss your future. There's talk of promoting you to Rear Admiral and giving you command of Naval Special Warfare Development Group." I opened the folder and stared at assignment details that represented the pinnacle of special operations leadership. DevGru was responsible for developing tactics and training for the Navy's most elite units, including SEAL Team 6. Officers typically reached this level after 25 years of service. I had 20. "Sir, this is extraordinary. What's the timeline?" 6 months. "But first, you need to complete the Naval War College program and spend time at the Pentagon working strategic planning. The Navy is betting on you becoming something special, Russell. Don't make them regret it." The next 18 months blurred together in a mixture of advanced education and high-level assignments that tested every leadership skill I had developed. At the War College, I studied under professors who had advised presidents and planned military operations that shaped world history. My thesis on integrating special operations across service branches caught attention from senior leaders throughout the Department of Defense. The Pentagon assignment introduced me to the political complexity of military leadership. Working for the Chief of Naval Operations meant briefing members of Congress, coordinating with intelligence agencies, and developing strategies that balanced military effectiveness with diplomatic considerations. It was chess played on a global board, with consequences measured in lives and national security. My promotion to Rear Admiral happened at the Naval Academy, a ceremony that brought together officers from throughout my career. Standing on the same parade ground where I had once marched as a midshipman, receiving my first star from the Secretary of the Navy himself, felt like closing a circle that began with my father's rejection 20 years earlier. The reception afterward filled the officers' club with 500 guests, including enlisted sailors who had flown in from deployments around the world just to attend. Master Chief Rodriguez, now retired, presented me with a gift from the men and women I had led over the years. A custom-made ceremonial sword with an inscription that read, "To Admiral Mitchell, who taught us that honor is earned through service, not inherited through blood." I searched the crowd for familiar faces from home, knowing I would not find them but hoping anyway. Thomas had not acknowledged the invitation, just as he had ignored every previous milestone in my career. Admiral Patricia Chen, who had become my mentor and advocate within the Navy hierarchy, pulled me aside during the reception. "Russell, I've watched you grow from a promising young officer into one of the finest leaders in our service. But I see something in your eyes tonight that troubles me." "Ma'am, you're still looking for approval from someone who will never give it. The Navy has given you everything you've earned and more. When are you going to let that be enough?" Her words stayed with me through the following months, as I took command of Naval Special Warfare Development Group. The assignment was everything I had hoped, developing new training protocols that reduced injury rates while improving mission effectiveness, coordinating with allied special operations forces around the world, and mentoring the next generation of special warfare officers. The innovation I was most proud of involved integrating psychological resilience training with traditional physical conditioning. Too many good operators were being lost to post-traumatic stress and related issues, not because they lacked courage, but because the military had never taught them how to process the emotional toll of their service. The program I developed, working with leading psychologists and veteran operators, reduced mental health casualties by 40%, while actually improving operational performance. Special operations forces around the world began adopting our protocols, and I was invited to brief NATO allies on implementation strategies. My promotion to full admiral came 3 years later, making me the youngest 4-star admiral in the modern Navy. The ceremony took place at the Pentagon, with the Secretary of Defense presiding and my fellow admirals in attendance. The responsibility was overwhelming. I now commanded naval special operations for the entire United States, with thousands of sailors and Marines under my authority. The highlight of the ceremony came when the Enlisted Advisory Council presented me with a plaque signed by over 3,000 current and former special operations personnel. The inscription read, "To Admiral Mitchell, who proved that the best leaders are those who serve their people as faithfully as their people serve their country." That evening, I sat in my Pentagon office looking out at the Washington Monument, thinking about the journey that had brought me to this point. 25 years of service, deployments to 6 continents, operations that had saved countless lives and protected American interests around the world. I had earned the respect of presidents and the loyalty of warriors. But the phone call I wanted to make, to share this moment with the man who had raised me, still felt impossible. Thomas had made it clear that nothing I accomplished in uniform would ever measure up to his definition of success. At some point I realized, you have to stop seeking water from a well that has run dry. Instead, I called Sarah. We had been dating for 2 years, a relationship that began when she treated my injuries after a training accident at the Naval Medical Center. Dr. Sarah Williams was a trauma surgeon who understood the demands of military life because she lived them herself as a Navy Reserve officer. "Congratulations, Admiral Mitchell," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "How does it feel to be the youngest 4-star in the Navy?" "Lonely," I admitted. "It should be the happiest day of my career, but all I can think about is calling someone who would hang up before I could tell him the news." "Russell, you have 3,000 people who signed that plaque tonight. You have Marines who would follow you into hell and back. You have me. When are you going to let the family you've chosen matter more than the one you happen to be born into?" Her words echoed Admiral Chen's advice from years earlier. Perhaps it was time to stop chasing ghosts and start building the life I actually wanted. 6 months later, I asked Sarah to marry me, presenting her with my grandmother's ring during a weekend at the family cabin in the mountains outside Denver. She said yes while we sat on the deck watching the sunrise over the same peaks I had stared at as a child, dreaming of adventures I had now lived. But even as I planned the happiest day of my life, I could not shake the desperate hope that maybe, finally, Thomas would see his son as someone worth celebrating. Planning a wedding while serving as a 4-star admiral presented unique challenges I had not anticipated. Sarah and I wanted a ceremony that honored our military service while celebrating the family we were creating together. After considering venues across the country, we settled on the Broadmoor Hotel in Colorado Springs, a choice that allowed my extended family to attend while providing the elegance Sarah deserved. The decision to return to Colorado was partly practical and partly emotional. I told myself it was about convenience for elderly relatives and family friends who had known me since childhood. But truthfully, I harbored a secret hope that hosting the wedding close to home might bridge the gap between Thomas and me. 3 months before the ceremony, I drove to Denver to personally deliver the invitation. The Mitchell Development offices occupied an entire floor of a downtown high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city Thomas had helped build. His secretary, Mrs. Patterson, had worked for him since before I was born. She greeted me with genuine warmth, despite the years that had passed. "Russell, look at you in your uniform. I remember when you were just a little boy visiting your father's office. Now you're an admiral. Thomas must be so proud." Her assumption hit me like a physical blow, but I managed to smile. "Is he available? I have something special to give him." Thomas's office had grown more impressive over the years, with architectural awards covering one wall and development project photographs filling another. He looked up from his computer when I entered, his expression shifting from surprise to resignation. "Russell, I wasn't expecting you." I approached his desk in my service dress blues, feeling once again like the 12-year-old boy showing his report card. "Dad, Sarah and I are getting married in March. I wanted to personally invite you to the ceremony." I placed the invitation on his desk, a cream-colored card with gold lettering that had taken Sarah weeks to perfect. Thomas glanced at it without picking it up. Colorado Springs. Military theme, I assume? It's at the Broadmoor. Sarah chose it because she loves the mountain views. The ceremony will honor both our service and our families. I waited for him to open the invitation, to show some interest in the details, and you'll be wearing your uniform, I suppose. Making a spectacle of yourself in front of people who matter. The familiar sting of his disapproval washed over me, but I forced myself to remain calm. I've earned the right to wear this uniform, Dad. It represents 25 years of service to our country. It represents 25 years of avoiding real responsibility. Thomas finally picked up the invitation, examining it like evidence in a trial. Your mother always said you would grow out of this phase. She died believing you would eventually come home and build something lasting. I have built something lasting. I've built a career serving something bigger than myself. I've led thousands of sailors and Marines. I've protected American lives and interests around the world. Thomas set the invitation down and leaned back in his chair. And what do you have to show for it? A government pension and a chest full of ribbons? Russell, I could buy and sell most of the people who will attend your little ceremony. That's real power. That's real success. I stared at this man who shared my DNA but understood nothing about my values. Dad, I'm not asking you to approve of my career. I'm asking you to come to my wedding. I'm asking you to be my father for one day. I'll consider it, he said, but his tone suggested the conversation was over. I assume Sarah is also military? Good luck building a stable family when you're both deployed half the time. I left his office with the invitation still sitting on his desk, unopened. Mrs. Patterson squeezed my hand as I passed her desk. He'll come around, honey. Sometimes it just takes time. But time was not healing the wounds between us. If anything, my success seemed to deepen Thomas's resentment. I learned from my cousin Michael that Thomas actively deflected conversations about my career at family gatherings. When relatives asked about his Admiral son, Thomas would change the subject or make dismissive comments about government jobs. The revelation that hurt most came from an unexpected source. Captain Jake Williams, my former mentor and current best man, called me 6 weeks before the wedding with disturbing news. Russell, I need to tell you something that might be hard to hear. The Navy's Public Affairs Office has been trying to coordinate with your father for a profile piece about military families. They've approached him 3 times about featuring you in a national campaign, and he's refused every interview. Not only that, but he told our public affairs officer that you were nothing special and that the Navy was wasting their time trying to make you into some kind of hero. The betrayal felt worse than any enemy fire I had faced. It was one thing for Thomas to withhold approval privately, but actively undermining my reputation to my own service was unforgivable. Jake, there's more, isn't there? He's been telling people in Denver that you're just a low-level military bureaucrat. Some of the business leaders who know about your actual rank and responsibilities are confused by the disconnect. A few have asked me directly what's going on with your family situation. I sat in my Pentagon office, staring at the photographs of operations I had led and awards I had earned, trying to process this new level of rejection. Thomas was not just withholding support. He was actively trying to diminish my accomplishments in the eyes of others. Sarah found me that evening sitting on our apartment balcony, still in uniform, watching traffic move through Arlington. She had finished a 12-hour surgery rotation but took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. What happened today? I told her about Jake's call, about Thomas's betrayal of trust that went beyond family dysfunction into deliberate sabotage. Sarah listened without interrupting, her surgeon's training helping her process complex information calmly. Russell, you need to make a choice. You can spend our wedding day hoping for approval from a man who has proven he will never give it, or you can focus on the people who actually love and respect you. It's not that simple, Sarah. He's my father. Despite everything, I keep thinking that maybe this time will be different. Honey, look at me. She took my hands, her voice gentle but firm. You have earned the respect of 3 presidents. You have saved countless lives. You have led the finest warriors in the world. When are you going to let that be enough? As we finalized wedding preparations over the following weeks, I struggled with a decision that seemed simple but felt monumental. What to wear to my own wedding. Sarah had always assumed I would wear my Admiral dress whites, and initially, that had been my plan. The uniform represented everything I had achieved, every sacrifice I had made to earn my place in the Navy. But Thomas's disapproval haunted me. Part of me wondered if wearing a civilian tuxedo might finally bridge the gap between us, might show him that I valued our relationship more than military protocol. Sarah sensed my internal conflict during our final dress rehearsal. After the wedding party left, she confronted me directly. "You're thinking about wearing a tux, aren't you? I just want him to be proud of me for once. If wearing civilian clothes makes that possible." Russell Mitchell, listen to me carefully. If you walk down that aisle in anything other than the uniform you've earned the right to wear, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. More importantly, I'll know that I married a man who's still trying to please someone who will never be pleased. Her words stung because they were true. But breaking a 25-year pattern of seeking Thomas's approval felt impossible, even on my wedding day. The morning of the ceremony, I woke before dawn in my hotel suite at the Broadmoor. The dress whites hung in the closet next to a civilian tuxedo I had rented as backup. Both options stared at me like paths to different futures. That's when my phone buzzed with the message that shattered whatever hope I still carried for reconciliation. The phone buzzed at 0600 hours, pulling me from restless sleep. My wedding day had arrived with perfect Colorado sunshine streaming through the hotel windows, the kind of crisp March morning that made the Rocky Mountains look like they were carved from crystal. I should have been thinking about vows and celebration, but instead, I lay in bed dreading what the day might bring. I picked up the phone expecting a message from Sarah or Jake with final ceremony details. Instead, I found a text from my father that felt like a knife through my chest. "You're wearing a uniform to your wedding? Disgraceful. You've embarrassed this family for the last time, Russell. Real men build empires, not play dress-up soldier. Don't expect me to sit there and watch you make a mockery of what should be a respectable ceremony. Your mother would be ashamed." I read the message 3 times, each pass making it hurt worse. The reference to my mother, who had always supported my dreams, was particularly cruel. Thomas knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. My hands shook as I set the phone down on the nightstand. After 25 years of hoping for his approval, this was how he chose to respond to the most important day of my life. Not with love or support or even polite indifference, but with calculated cruelty designed to break my spirit. A knock on the door interrupted my spiral into despair. "Russell? It's Jake. Can I come in?" I opened the door to find my best man holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing the concerned expression of someone who knew me well enough to sense trouble. Commander Jake Williams had been my mentor at the Naval Academy and remained my closest friend through 2 decades of service. If anyone could help me process this betrayal, it was him. "You look like someone died," he said, handing me a coffee. "What happened?" I showed him the text message without comment. Jake read it twice, his jaw tightening with each word. "Son of a bitch," he muttered. "Russell, I'm sorry. I know how much you wanted him to be here today. Maybe he's right, Jake. Maybe wearing the uniform is inappropriate. Maybe I'm being selfish, putting my pride ahead of family harmony." Jake set down his coffee and grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look at him directly. "Listen to me very carefully, Admiral Mitchell. That uniform represents 25 years of faithful service to your country. It represents lives saved, missions accomplished, and leadership that has earned the respect of warriors around the world. If your father can't see the honor in that, then he's the one who should be ashamed. But what if I could fix this by just wearing a tux? What if that's all it takes to have a relationship with him? Russell, you've been trying to fix this relationship your entire adult life. How's that working out for you?" Jake's voice carried the authority of someone who had watched me struggle with this issue for 20 years. "Besides, what about Sarah? What about the message you send to everyone who's coming to honor you today?" As if summoned by our conversation, another knock came at the door. This time it was Sarah, radiant in her bridal robe with her hair in curlers, accompanied by her maid of honor, Dr. Lisa Chen. "I know it's bad luck to see each other before the ceremony, but I had to check on you," Sarah said. "You seemed troubled last night, and I was worried." I handed her the phone with Thomas's message displayed. Her expression shifted from concern to fury as she read. "That bastard," she said quietly. On our wedding day. He couldn't even give you this one day without trying to hurt you. Sarah, I'm thinking maybe I should wear the tux instead. Maybe if I compromise. No. Her voice cut through my uncertainty like a scalpel. Russell, look at me. Do you remember what you told me on our first date? You said that honor isn't negotiable, that integrity means doing the right thing even when it costs you personally. This is different. This is family. No, honey, it's not different. This is exactly the same principle. Your father is asking you to deny who you are, to hide your accomplishments, to be ashamed of the life you've built serving others. That's not love, Russell. That's emotional manipulation. Lisa, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. Russell, I've watched Sarah work with trauma patients for years. One thing she's taught me is that you can't heal a relationship with someone who's determined to keep hurting you. Your father has had 25 years to be proud of you. If he's not proud now, when will he ever be? Sarah sat on the bed beside me, taking my hands in hers. I fell in love with Admiral Russell Mitchell, a man who earned his rank through courage, intelligence, and dedication. If you walk down that aisle pretending to be someone else, then I'm marrying a stranger. Her words cut through the fog of confusion and hurt that had clouded my judgment. She was right. Everything I had accomplished, every life I had saved, every mission I had led successfully, had been done while wearing this uniform. To hide that on my wedding day would be betraying not just myself, but everyone who had trusted me to lead them. You're right, I said, feeling strength return to my voice. I've spent too many years trying to earn approval from someone who's determined not to give it. Today is about the family we're creating together, not the one that's rejected me. Jake clapped me on the shoulder. There's the Admiral I know. Now, there's something else I need to tell you. Something that might change how you feel about this whole situation. What do you mean? Russell, when I learned about your father's pattern of behavior, I reached out to some of our colleagues. Word has gotten around the special operations community about what's happening. People who've served with you over the years. People whose lives you've saved. People who respect what you've accomplished. Sarah squeezed my hand. Jake, what are you saying? I'm saying that when Admiral Mitchell walks into that chapel today, he's not going to be alone. He's going to have the support of the family he's earned through service and sacrifice. The family that actually matters. I looked at my best friend, seeing something in his expression that suggested he knew more than he was telling. Jake, what did you do? I made some phone calls, sent some emails, reminded a few people that their admiral was getting married and might appreciate their support. He smiled with the satisfaction of a successful operation. Let's just say you might be surprised by the guest list. Before I could ask for more details, Jake's phone rang. He answered with military precision. Williams here. Yes, sir. Roger that. We're on schedule. He hung up and turned to us with obvious excitement. That was the security detail for the chapel. Apparently, there's been some unexpected activity in the parking lot. They want to coordinate entry procedures. Security detail? I asked. Jake, what's going on? You'll find out soon enough. For now, focus on getting ready to marry the most amazing woman in the Navy. And Russell, wear the dress whites. Wear them with pride. As Sarah and Lisa left to finish their preparations, I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my admiral's uniform. 4 silver stars gleamed on the shoulder boards, each one representing years of sacrifice and achievement. The ribbons on my chest told the story of deployments and operations that had shaped me into the leader I had become. For the first time in 25 years, I looked at myself in uniform and felt only pride. Thomas's approval had become irrelevant. What mattered was the oath I had taken, the people I had served with, and the woman who loved me exactly as I was. I picked up my phone and deleted Thomas's message without reading it again. Some wounds could only heal when you stopped picking at them. It was time to focus on the family that had chosen me, rather than the one that had rejected me. The chapel at the Broadmoor Hotel could accommodate 300 guests, and Sarah and I had invited exactly that number: family members, college friends, and a select group of military colleagues. As I walked through the hotel lobby toward the ceremony, I felt the familiar pre-mission calm that had served me well in combat situations. Jake met me outside the chapel doors, looking unusually formal even for a wedding. You ready for this, Admiral? as ready as I'll ever be. Any sign of my father? He's here. Front row, looking about as thrilled as you'd expect. Jake paused, checking his watch. Russell, before we go in, I need to prepare you for something. The guest list has changed somewhat since yesterday. Changed? How? You'll see. Just remember that every person in that chapel is here because they respect and admire you. Let that sink in when you see what's waiting for you. The chapel doors opened, and I stepped into a scene that took my breath away. The venue was packed far beyond capacity, with every seat filled and people standing along the walls. But it was not the number of guests that stunned me. It was their identity. Row after row of military dress uniforms filled the chapel. Navy dress blues, Marine dress blues, Army dress greens, and Air Force dress blues created a sea of perfectly pressed military precision. I recognized faces from throughout my career. Sailors I had served with as a junior officer, Marines who had fought beside me in Afghanistan, special operations personnel from commands around the world. Master Chief Rodriguez, now retired, caught my eye from the third row and nodded with obvious pride. Commander Peterson, my first commanding officer, sat next to Captain Martinez, who had served under my command in Iraq. Admiral Chen, my mentor and advocate, wore her dress whites with the dignity of 30 years of naval service. But the most stunning sight was the group occupying the back 10 rows of the chapel. 202 Navy SEALs sat in perfect formation, their uniforms immaculate, their bearing reflecting the elite training that made them America's finest warriors. These were men from every SEAL team, representing operations I had planned, missions I had led, and battles we had fought together. I stood frozen in the doorway, overwhelmed by this display of respect and solidarity. These warriors had traveled from bases around the world, used their own leave time and money to attend the wedding of their admiral. The message was clear. I might not have my biological father's approval, but I had earned the loyalty of the finest military family in the world. Sarah appeared at my side, radiant in her wedding dress, her eyes wide as she took in the extraordinary scene. Russell, how many people are here? I have no idea. This is not what we planned. Jake leaned in close. Word got out through the Special Operations Network. When people heard about your father's behavior and your wedding date, they decided to show their support. The hotel had to open the ballroom overflow area to accommodate everyone who wanted to attend. The organist began the processional march, and Sarah and I walked down the aisle together, a military tradition that symbolized our equal partnership in marriage. As we passed each row, I saw faces that told the story of my career. Young ensigns I had mentored, senior chiefs who had taught me seamanship, officers who had become lifelong friends through shared hardship and mutual respect. In the front row, Thomas sat stiffly in his civilian suit, his expression unreadable, as he watched his son receive an honor guard fit for a head of state. Next to him sat my Aunt Linda, my cousin Michael, and other family members whose faces reflected amazement at the spectacle unfolding before them. The Navy chaplain who performed the ceremony was Captain Robert Hayes, a veteran of 3 combat deployments who had served with me in Afghanistan. His words about duty, honor, and the families we choose carried special meaning in this context. Marriage is like military service, he said, addressing Sarah and me while speaking to the entire chapel. It requires courage, commitment, and the willingness to put someone else's welfare before your own. Russell and Sarah have already proven their capacity for that kind of selfless service in their military careers. Today, they pledged to serve each other with the same dedication. As we exchanged vows, I felt the weight of history in that chapel. These were not just wedding guests. They were witnesses to a moment that transcended personal ceremony to become a statement about military family and the bonds forged through shared service. I promise to stand by you through every deployment, every challenge, every moment of doubt, I said to Sarah. But the words resonated with everyone who had ever worn a uniform. I promise to be the partner you deserve and the leader our future family needs. Sarah's vows brought tears to my eyes and spontaneous applause from the gallery. I promise to love the warrior and the man, to support your service while building our own family traditions. I promise to be your anchor when the seas are rough, and your celebration when you return home safely. The moment that will stay with me forever came just as the chaplain prepared to pronounce us husband and wife. A movement in the back of the chapel caught my attention, and I turned to see all 202 SEALs rising to their feet in perfect unison. Admiral on deck. The voice belonged to Senior Chief Petty Officer Thompson, a veteran of 15 deployments who had served under my command in 3 different units. The words echoed through the chapel like thunder, repeated by voices that had called commands in combat zones around the world. Every military person in the chapel snapped to attention, creating a moment of respect and recognition that transcended rank and service branch. I stood at attention and returned their salute, overwhelmed by the honor they were showing me. But as the chapel fell silent, I noticed that one person remained seated. Thomas had not stood. He had not saluted. He sat in the front row with his arms crossed, the only person in the chapel unwilling to acknowledge the moment. The chaplain, understanding the significance of what had just happened, paused to let the moment sink in before continuing. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present Admiral and Dr. Mitchell, united in marriage and in service to something greater than themselves. The chapel erupted in applause and cheers that could be heard throughout the hotel. As Sarah and I walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, every person we passed represented a relationship built on mutual respect, shared sacrifice, and earned trust. But as we reached the front row, I saw Thomas sitting rigidly, his face a mask of disapproval and embarrassment. For 25 years, I had craved one moment of pride from this man. Now, surrounded by hundreds of warriors who respected my leadership, his disapproval seemed smaller and less important than I had ever imagined. The receiving line outside the chapel lasted for 2 hours as guests congratulated us and shared stories of missions we had completed together. Each handshake, each hug, each word of congratulation reinforced the truth I was finally ready to accept. Family is not about blood relation, but about the people who stand with you when it matters most. As the crowd began moving toward the reception, Thomas approached me with an expression I had never seen before. For the first time in my memory, my father looked uncertain, almost vulnerable. "Russell, we need to talk." The reception ballroom had been transformed to accommodate nearly 600 guests, far beyond our original plans. Tables filled with military personnel from every service branch created an atmosphere more like a military ball than a traditional wedding reception. The sight was both overwhelming and deeply moving. Thomas stood awkwardly at the edge of the crowd, clearly out of place among the uniforms and military bearings surrounding him. Sarah squeezed my hand as she noticed him approaching. "I'll give you a moment," she said, kissing my cheek. "But remember, you don't owe him anything more than basic courtesy." Thomas walked with me to a quiet corner of the ballroom, away from the celebration but still visible to the hundreds of guests who continued arriving. His usual commanding presence seemed diminished, replaced by something I had never seen in him before: uncertainty. "Russell, I need to say something, and I need you to listen without interrupting." I nodded, bracing myself for another lecture about my life choices or criticism of the military spectacle my wedding had become. That SEAL who came up to me during the ceremony, Senior Chief Thompson, he told me something I didn't know. Thomas's voice carried a tremor I had never heard before. He said you saved his life in Afghanistan. Not just him, but his entire team. He said you planned an operation that extracted them from an impossible situation when other commanders had written them off as lost. I remembered the mission clearly. Intelligence had been wrong about enemy strength, and Thompson's team had been pinned down for 18 hours with no viable extraction route. The conventional wisdom was to wait for enemy forces to disperse, but that would have meant certain death for the team. I had developed an alternative plan using helicopter insertion and diversionary tactics that everyone else considered too risky. "That's what we do, Dad. We don't leave people behind." He cried when he told me, Thomas continued, his own eyes beginning to water. "This tough, hardened warrior started crying when he talked about what you did for him and his men. He said you risked your own career arguing with superior officers who wanted to abandon the mission." I had not known that Thompson remembered the political battles I had fought to get approval for the rescue operation. As a junior officer, challenging senior leadership had been dangerous to my career, but I could not live with abandoning fellow service members. Then Admiral Chen introduced herself, Thomas said. "She told me about your innovations in special operations training. about how your protocols have saved hundreds of lives by reducing training accidents while improving combat effectiveness. She said you revolutionized how the Navy approaches psychological resilience in high-stress operations. Dad, where are you going with this? Thomas looked around the ballroom, taking in the sight of hundreds of military personnel, celebrating with genuine joy and respect. Son, I built shopping centers and office buildings. I made money and created jobs, and I thought that was the measure of a successful man. But walking through this crowd tonight, listening to story after story about your leadership, your courage, your dedication to taking care of your people, I realize I've been a fool. The words I had waited 25 years to hear were finally coming, but they felt different than I had imagined. Instead of validation, I felt sadness for all the years we had lost to his stubborn pride and my desperate need for approval. Master Chief Rodriguez told me about the night before that mission in Afghanistan where you earned the Navy Cross, Thomas continued. He said you spent hours going over the plan, checking and rechecking every detail, because you refused to risk your team's lives on anything less than perfect preparation. He said you ate last, slept least, and carried the heaviest pack because you believed leadership meant serving your people, not commanding them. Thomas paused, struggling with emotions he had never learned to express. Russell, I was wrong about everything. I thought success meant accumulating wealth and power. But these people, these warriors, they follow you because you've earned their trust through your actions. That's real leadership. That's real success. A commotion near the entrance caught our attention. A group of senior military officers was entering the ballroom, led by a familiar figure in Navy dress whites. Admiral Michael Richardson, the Chief of Naval Operations and the highest-ranking officer in the Navy, approached our table with obvious purpose. Admiral Mitchell, congratulations on your marriage, and thank you for allowing me to attend your reception. The ballroom quieted as people recognized the CNO. His presence at a subordinate's wedding was highly unusual and sent a clear message about my standing within the Navy hierarchy. Sir, the honor is mine. I'm overwhelmed by everyone who came to celebrate with us. Admiral Richardson turned to address the crowd, his voice carrying the authority of 40 years of naval service. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to share something with you that Admiral Mitchell is too modest to mention himself. Last month, the President signed a new defense authorization bill that includes provisions for special operations training and psychological resilience that were based entirely on protocols developed by your host tonight. The ballroom erupted in applause, but Admiral Richardson continued. More importantly, the innovations Russell has brought to our special operations community have been adopted by allied forces around the world. His leadership has literally changed how democratic nations train and deploy their elite forces. I felt Sarah's hand squeeze mine as the magnitude of this recognition sank in. The CNO attending my wedding was honor enough, but his public endorsement represented validation at the highest levels of government and military leadership. Thomas listened to this speech with growing amazement, finally understanding the scope of what his son had accomplished. When the CNO finished speaking and moved on to greet other guests, Thomas turned to me with tears in his eyes. Russell, I owe you an apology that's 25 years overdue. I was so focused on what I thought success should look like that I was blind to the extraordinary man you became. These people don't respect you because of your rank. They respect you because of your character. Dad, I stopped needing your approval a long time ago, but I never stopped wanting it. You have it now, son. You've had it for years. I was just too stubborn and foolish to admit it. Thomas looked around the ballroom again, taking in the sight of America's finest warriors, celebrating my marriage. I spent 30 years building an empire of concrete and steel. You built an empire of loyalty and respect. Guess which one will last longer? The rest of the reception passed in a blur of toasts, dancing, and conversations with guests who had traveled from around the world to attend. Each interaction reinforced the lesson I was finally learning. The family that matters most is the one you earn through your actions, not the one you inherit through blood. Senior Chief Thompson approached me during the last dance, his wife by his side. Sir, I wanted you to know that my team has stayed in touch over the years because of what you taught us about looking out for each other. 5 of us are here tonight, and we all credit you with not just saving our lives, but showing us how to be better leaders ourselves. His words carried more weight than any medal or promotion. Leadership is not about commanding others. It's about developing others to become leaders themselves. As Sarah and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon, Thomas pulled me aside for one final conversation. "Russell, I know I can't undo 25 years of being a terrible father, but if you'll let me, I'd like to learn about your world. I'd like to understand what I was too blind to see. Dad, that would mean everything to me. But it has to be genuine. I won't pretend my service doesn't matter just to make you comfortable. Son, after tonight, I wouldn't dare ask you to hide who you are. I'm proud of Admiral Russell Mitchell, and I want everyone to know he's my son." Driving away from the Broadmoor that night, Sarah and I reflected on a wedding that had become something neither of us expected. What started as a private ceremony had transformed into a declaration about the power of earned family and authentic leadership. "Any regrets about wearing the uniform?" Sarah asked as we headed toward the airport. "Only that it took me 25 years to realize that the opinion of someone who doesn't understand service will never matter as much as the respect of those who do. The lesson I learned that day extends far beyond military service. True family is not about blood relation, but about the people who stand with you through challenges, who celebrate your successes without jealousy, and who see your worth even when you struggle to see it yourself. Sometimes the family we choose is more loyal than the one we inherit." My father and I rebuilt our relationship slowly over the following years. He never fully understood the military world, but he learned to respect it. More importantly, he learned to respect the man his son had become through service to others. The 202 SEALs who stood and saluted that day taught me that honor is not inherited. It's earned through consistent actions over time. Leadership is not about commanding respect. It's about serving others with such dedication that respect becomes inevitable. Blood may define your origins, but character defines your destiny. The salute that mattered most that day came not from the man who shared my DNA, but from the warriors who had seen my heart under fire and found it worthy of their trust. Have you ever had to choose between seeking approval from family and staying true to your values? How did you handle the conflict between wanting acceptance and maintaining your integrity? Share your story in the comments below, and let's discuss how we can support each other in building the authentic relationships we deserve. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that the family that stands with you matters more than the one that sits in judgment. Like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges, and share this with anyone who needs to hear that they are enough exactly as they are. Until next time, stay strong and keep serving something greater than yourself.